but yeah, you're right. When they make it and then, they start doing incredibly stupid things with it, and first of which is they usually marry the hooker they've been using.
There you
You
go.
know? And then she ends up having a kid. So now they
Right,
got an anchor baby, and she's
right,
set for life. And
right.
that's nothing against her. I mean,
Yeah.
it's good work if you can get it.
Right.
So they,
Thank
they
you for the
just
future emails.
well that
Powers, they're going to think we're related.
you got more hair than I cut mine short like a Marine now. So
That's a first world problem when you're over 60 and you have so much hair and you still cut it like a Marine. Whereas I've got 3 pieces that wave back and forth like a duck.
okay. Can you read my thing?
Like father, like daughter.
Yeah. Cool.
It was Heather's Christmas, Father's Day present.
Oh,
So,
nice.
so that is quite nice. So Deepak, are we talking about stupid things people spend money on today? Lifestyles of the rich and famous? That's my that's what I've got on my notes.
Since we got a forensic accountant, I thought, what a better way to bug him.
Right. Have him just, hey, I are we recording already or no?
Yeah, we're recording.
Oh, okay. So what you want to do is go, hey Dan, what's the dumbest shit you had okay people buying? That's
Mm-hmm.
and
I
I
got a
think
good answer. I'm trying to think if I got a good answer for that one.
Let's do it.
I'm thinking.
Oh, you're thinking. I thought you said thank you.
Oh, yeah, no. Nothing comes to mind, but it is 4 o'clock in the morning here.
Yes.
So.
I'm happy you're with us, buddy. I'm here at the pub making bread, so I'm getting 2 things done at once. Okay, let me tell you so for background on this whole thing. So we had a show in America called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous decades ago. And they would show you all of these homes and having been thrown out of some of the finest educational systems in the Midwest, I had been in some homes that looked just like those. And what I always found when I was really little is it was almost overwhelming. They were so big. And I was always just kind of surprised at the stuff people owned. I mean, we had 9 people living in our house, and my mom usually always had a couple other stragglers. So we didn't have any of those problems. We had different problems. But it was fascinating. I remember distinctly playing hide and seek in a friend of mine's, and I would call it a compound, not just a mansion, but a compound. And I got lost. I literally lost upstairs. There were so many rooms, and nobody came and found me. I just eventually had to find my way back down. It was nuts.
It was about the time you got hungry and went looking for the kitchen, Sean.
Right. Right. And I'm just like, every door looked the same. The hallway was all kind of, beige and hardwood floor. Beautiful place. And I mean, really and truly, just stunning, beautiful. But I had a little girlfriend in like 3rd grade, and their family's home had a theater on the 3rd floor with like 15 seats, like a real one with the drawing, oh my God, the curtain, the drawing curtain, not a full size stage, but about half, but yeah, 15 seats. I mean, and this wasn't for TV. This was live performance.
In their home. Yeah.
In their home. Right. So let me throw one more out there because I'm not trying to brag, but so I shoot a commercial with Paul Newman in a house in Kansas City that's not a house, it was a mansion. And we were able to fit an orchestra and 150 people in the foyer for Oklahomans to film a commercial. It could easily fit that much. I mean, it was nuts. And that was an old gangster named Pendergast. It was his original house.
It's funny. I've even heard of him. So I did think of a story. I was in Boca years ago, back in the mid 80s. And we were affiliated with a bunch of scoundrels who were renamed nameless, but they had a luxury uh, uh, lots near the beach. And so they said that they had sad news that this one 26-year-old kid came in and wanted to buy a $2.5 million house,
Right.
but he just couldn't make it and had to settle for a $1.75 million house. And I
Wow.
remember standing up and saying, "Oh, oh, hold on. No, can't shed a tear on that one." Then
Okay, that was good.
I get told you have an attitude.
Yeah.
And I think I told him I needed to go get a cup of coffee or something like that
Yeah.
because it was going to
God.
blow up.
I
Oh, yeah.
think that the challenge that I have always found is it seems to be the most stupid. The stupidity is new money, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have any new money, but you also don't realize that that flow continues. And I'm guilty of it. I did real well in my early 20s. The dumbest thing I bought, looking back, which is actually pretty reasonable, was a shoe shine machine that was brass. And when I know it's but at
God
least
damn
I
it,
didn't
Sean.
buy horses. At least I didn't buy horses because I was thrown to that one. But here's the funny thing about it all. I'm like 25 and I've downsized and everything else and I pissed away most of my money and I still had that thing and I was like and I was moving and I'm like, why on earth do I still have this? And I just put it out by the curb. It was like the saddest thing in the entire world was this solid brass little. And for those of you who don't know what they are, in nice clothing stores, they have these things and you push a button and the bottom turns and one's red and one's black and you polish your shoes with it. And when I was a little boy, I thought, when I make it, I'm going to get myself one of those.
Sean, I've heard stories from people where they thought if they owned a lot of Tupperware sets, they made it. What the hell is this brass
Right.
damn thing you're talking about?
Exactly. Right. But it really was nice. But how many times do you need to shine your shoes? Don't you just take them to somebody who does it at that point if you got that much money? So it's interesting to have watched. So I've got a guy I went to grade school or high school with, and he inherited about $500,000, but he turned it into 15 million. So, and then he turned it into 30 million, and he trades grain and some other stuff. But I've never seen that guy make any really stupid, crazy purchases. But I had another friend of mine that I don't know if he graduated from college, but he's the stadium expert worldwide, weirdly enough. But he has a twin engine plane and he's got some houses everywhere and all this other stuff. But he says he needs them. Like if he goes to Buenos Aires and he's working on a project, he goes, I can't rent a hotel. I've got to have a place to lay out all my stuff, have meetings and everything else instead of doing space. So he makes it, I guess, maybe justifiable, and maybe Powers needs to kick in there. Maybe that one's a better write-off, and in the long run, you own something. I don't know, but he's got a lot of houses.
You'd be surprised at what people put in their companies and say, I need it for business.
Right.
I had a client one time where there was a Chief Cherokee vehicle. I didn't see it out in the parking lot, and it was the second company vehicle assigned to the president of this company. So I happened to ask the person, and I was in Texas. The client was in Texas, and I asked him, "Where's the Chief Cherokee?" And they go, and the CFO kind of went like, "It's in Colorado." And I go, "What?" He goes, "Well, they have a summer house, winter house, whatever the hell you want to call it, in Colorado, and that's where it is. And his wife drives it."
Right. Wow.
So that was funny enough, but then he was indicted about a year later, and damned if the Chief Cherokee didn't come into the whole equation.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I think he got a suspended sentence of 2 years. So
Wow. But Deepak, I think the biggest thing is when people come from, like, we were not poor growing up, but we didn't have any extra money. But you see these things and go, oh, well, I mean, those people seem, because they do seem happier. They really do. And my parents weren't unhappy. My mom was like Kathy. She was happy all the time. And, but I really thought that was the way to go. You know, you make enough green and you're there. But I went to a boarding school, and this is kind of a, you know, you and I talk about it all the time, but literally the second biggest family in Kuwait, one of their sons was at this boarding school. And this kid had $5,000 a week for allowance. And I had $5 a week. And so I know what that movie is, but it never entered my mind at 16 years old to go rent a hotel and get a bunch of hookers and a bunch of cocaine and have some fun. I mean, I didn't know any better, but now I do because I learned it from him.
I'm going to depress you with this story for the sole reason that I don't mind like people buying those magnificent, like the huge houses and all of that nonsense. But here, the weird part that I noticed is a lot of my friends who are like just holding corporate jobs are like highly leveraged to the extent where I'm pretty sure like the entire paycheck just goes to service their entire family's lifestyle, which is the lifestyle of the rich and famous. And I don't see the point in that specifically.
I remember a guy telling me, he goes, "Yeah, I can live a lot better than I, than I make my salary." I go, "How's that?" He goes, "There's this wonderful thing called credit," and I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go." He went bankrupt about a year later.
Yeah. So I think what I would throw in there before we get too far out on that is I would blame most of this on lifestyle of the rich and famous, much like I would blame wedding dreams on Walt Disney. You know, you sit there and everything is made to look like it's accessible. Okay, so I'll give you my mom. My mom grew up with some family wealth. Her dad had done real well, and they died young. So I, of course, didn't get anything. But I would like to have.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. So I get invited. My roommate is from Mexico City at the boarding school. So at 15 years old, he'd been to my house for Christmas and Thanksgiving and all this other stuff and stayed with us. They invited us to go stay on their yacht for the summer. Me, not us, me. And my mom was like, "No, I'm not okay with that." And I was like, "God, are you kidding?" You know, I was 14. "Are you kidding me, Mom? What are you doing?" You know, and I'm yelling and throwing a fit. And I still remember her saying, "You know, Sean, wealth like that is like a drug. And it's so addictive, you will be chasing it for the rest of your life. And you'll be willing to do anything in the world to stay there, not to get there." She assumed I could get there, but to stay there. And still to this day, I still have that rolling around in the back of my head. That didn't make me save any more money in my early 20s. So, yeah.
Well, that was some sound advice. I wish more people would tell their kids that these days. Considering that our generation grew up with MTV Cribs, Sean, which was even worse.
Right.
At least lifestyle of the rich and famous showed you houses of people who were industrialists and were doing shit with their life. This one just shows you random aspects of musicians, their houses, and you're like, okay, unless I was born with that kind of talent, what the fuck am I looking at this for?
and I really think they should have done a follow-up show called Auctions of Cribs, because it's coming. You know, I mean, if you don't have like Dan will tell you as an accountant, go, "Hey, that's a bad idea." He really will. He'll tell you. A lot of accountants are just like, "It's none of my business." Yeah, I mean, I'm just here to do the taxes and make sure everything's legal.
When you mentioned lifestyles of the rich and famous, I actually had his son-in-law. I had this wonderful, wonderful gentleman who he said, "I easily made 50 million off of an investment I made back when I was in my 20s. He started buying a print shop, and it led to a huge fortune. So I made 50 million, and my wife's pretty much spent 25 million of it. He says, but my son-in-law, he owned the Sheridan on Maui years ago,
Wow.
back in the 80s.
Nice.
And he was actually on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous twice. All right.
Mm.
So he did very well for himself. Then he cashes out of Maui, and he gets in with a bunch of scoundrels in New Orleans, opening up a casino, lost every dime,
Everything.
then developed cancer and died. And very
Wow.
brilliantly. Yeah. And I was like, woof, that was
Right.
pretty bad. So, it was just kind of, rags to riches, back to rags story.
Right.
And that happens a lot. That happens
Yeah.
a lot. And of course now with, especially in real estate, the real estate community isn't that big. Okay. And you'll have people, I was at a meeting one time where they go, well, we're going to start a new subsidiary, and we're going to have a new project. And they go, well, who's going to head this up? And they go, well, I'll make up a name. And he goes, Jack Jones. And the guy blurts out, Christ, is he out of prison already?
Okay, that's
So,
awesome.
and I said, well, what are we paying him? He goes, 100 grand and a Cadillac. He says that'll keep him happy. And I go, and what he's going to do? He goes, nothing. He says he's going to be
Wow.
the face guy. And he says, but he's the type of guy that can bring in money.
Yeah.
I'm like, and he was in prison for what? Never got an answer for that one.
That is awesome. I think one of the other the initial things that I would point out to anybody who really is looking at somebody and thinks they have money. So my father-in-law had hit very, very, very big in the oil business. My original kid's grandpa, and he had a gold Rolex watch that spewed oil in diamonds out of the middle of the watch. Now,
Hey,
it wasn't his
I'm
only
not gonna
one
say
that he-
jizz.
Exactly right. Exactly. It wasn't his only one. The guy got roofied one time by somebody, and they stole the original one in his credit card. And I'm assuming it may have been somebody he didn't know that well. Who knows? But he was a really good example of the lifestyles of the rich and famous thing. So he's poor little orphaned Native American kid, and he hits huge. Literally the American dream. I mean, if there's one to be had, Native Americans need to be in that dream class too. But he didn't know what to do with it all. So the stories from his wife, back when she was alive, he would be getting these multiple $100,000 checks per day, and then he'd go out with all the workers and buy lunch, and everybody'd get drunk and forget about it. They would be in suit jacket pockets, literally multiple, and not get deposited. And to save money, just to be safe, she would go on a vacation with all of those checks and go open accounts down in Texas. And that's the only reason they didn't go bankrupt, is because of her stuff, not his.
Isn't it weird? In a lot of these
stuff.
stories, you'll hear like the women who are in charge of money stop the husband from going broke.
Right. Yeah, it's astounding, because I think the male ego, once you made that much, you believe you're somewhere. Mm-hmm. Sustaining that. Let Powers chime in on this. Sustaining it's the hard part. Making it is not the hard part. Blind dumb luck. Everybody will get a shot, and then how do you not waste it?
What is it we say? Even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. Okay, and when I tell people that all the time, but yeah, you're right. When they make it, and then they start doing incredibly stupid things with it, and first of which is they usually marry the hooker they've been using.
There you go.
And then she ends up having a kid, so now they got an anchor baby, and she's set for life. And that's nothing against her. I mean, it's good work if you can get it. So you know,
Thank
they
you for the
just,
future emails.
first of which is they usually marry the hooker they've been using,
There you
you know, and then she ends up having a kid. So now they
Right.
got an anchor baby, and she's
Right.
set for life. And
Right.
that's nothing against her. I mean,
Yeah.
it's good work if you can get it.
Right.
So, you know,
Thank
they
you for the
just
future emails.
well that and the other thing that happens too is then they get really incredibly stupid when it comes to income tax. Well, I want to pay the government anything.
Right.
I'll work for this. Well, tell you what, Jones, so did I.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I'm having a hard time feeling sorry for you. And they're like, well, I work hard. And if I hear that one more
Right.
time,
Yeah.
I'm going to come through the window on somebody.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
and then when they don't, they don't prepay the tax. Oh, I'll just let them get me at the end of the year. And then
Right.
then the first thing they do is they come after you. Well, how come I got a big penalty like this? Because you didn't take my advice and
Right.
you didn't prepay.
Yeah.
And that's normally either when they A, acquiesce, or B, say, you know what, I need a new CPA. And I'm like, sure. The the AICPA website is full of people that will be happy to have you.
Oh
So
yeah. God, isn't
yeah.
that the truth? And
Oh,
I think the other thing I would say is the more money you have, the more yes men you will have around you, because you no longer have to listen to people who annoy you. You know what I mean? As long as you're paying the bar tab, you can surround yourself with whoever you want.
An
well,
example comes to mind that shall go unnamed.
Right? Exactly. Well, I mean, I think that from a maturity standpoint, let me go ahead and do our usual podcast, bring everybody down thing. So I read this series of books called The Lives and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East by this guy named Bear Spalding about 30 years ago. And I thought, that is the smartest man I've ever heard of in my life. His entire goal was to have one key at the end of his life for an apartment or a boarding room that he rented. He doesn't want to own anything for anybody to deal with. And then you die. And I was like, that's genius, right? And most people think I'm crazy for wanting, that's how I want to end, right there. No mess.
oh yeah. I tell I had one client, we're in the room and he's got this vampire son. And the kid blurts out in the middle of the discussion, "You're spending my inheritance." And
Oh wow.
and I just looked at him and I felt like saying, "Hey, you want to adopt me and get rid of this one?"
Right.
And they have no clue. And I tell every one of my clients, I said, spend it all, spend
Yeah.
it, have a ball. And when hopefully the bill collector's knocking on your door the day they're zipping you in the body bag. Okay. Just have fun with it. You've earned it,
Yeah. Hey,
and
Powers, let me.
the other thing I tell people too is if you've got money, give it to your kids now.
Right.
When you're 20, 25 years old and you're raising kids, and all of a sudden your parents give you, a nice piece of money, $1, 10,000, 100,000, that's muchly appreciated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And rather than, when the kid is 72 years old and the old man's, 100, and he cashes out. Oh, great. You know what I'm going to do is buy a wheelchair with the studded tires or something.
Instead of your cribs, it's your transportation, wheelchairs and walkers. Hey, Dan, what is a sufficient amount to leave your kids so they don't become super assholes? Is it enough to help with the first house, or do you need to give them, obviously plain money is too much, but what's an appropriate amount?
Well, I think it's more in how you give it to them. And I've seen some wills and trusts set up that they get X amount at 25, X amount at 30, X
Right.
amount at 35. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think security, the first gift is a house. Okay, that is a wonderful, not having to slave over a mortgage for your life is an excellent second one would be, I think, education for children would be another
Yeah.
very good gift, etc. And then maybe some money towards the ultimate vacations that you could take for the next 5 years, something
Right.
like that. And but very the one thing that is bad is I've had people where they've passed away, the bank gets a hold of the trust and then they treat it like it's their money. I
Right.
had one bank officer tell one of my clients, well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, you getting that
Right.
money. And I'm like, it's in the trust. Okay.
Right.
She has the right to it. And it was a very large bank in Oklahoma City,
Right.
and it's like I said, this, before I think I had a couple of choice words for the guy, et cetera, and I think she ended up getting it. But they
Right.
they treat it like, because as soon as they lose that corpus or principal, they don't make money on it anymore,
That's right.
and
That's
it's
right.
very, very common. And they treat it like it's their own. And some people, they forget about it. It just keeps
Yep.
amassing, and all of a sudden, they die, and all of a sudden, the kids are like, "Dad was worth how much?" And we ate Cheerios every day.
So I had this guy. I'll tell you a fun story just because it's good fun story stuff. So I'm trying to remember what his name was. He was in Kansas City, Missouri. He's an Irish guy off the boat from Ireland, never married. He and his girlfriend lived next door to each other in a duplex because they never married, didn't want it to look improper. And so my dad is out eating breakfast before work one day, and he sees this guy with the local bishop, and he goes up to pay, and the banker, because this guy was a banker, says, "Hey, Bishop, I think you can pick up this one." And my dad was so appalled, he tried to go up and pay the bill for the bishop, assuming maybe this other guy was broke or something. When the guy dies, he left $250 million to the Catholic Church in our diocese.
No.
So
Wow.
right. And my dad was like, evidently that was the breakfast where he told the bishop he was getting the money. And so he made him buy
God,
breakfast.
that's a great story. That's we had
John Sullivan was his name. John Sullivan. There you go. Sorry.
I had the pleasure and the honor of working for one of the richest men in Canada in the early parts of the 80s in real estate. And he had made all his money. He was an orphan at 2, became very successful when he tried to get into the Army for World War II. He was actually an A baseball player as a pitcher, but he had a bad knee. So he couldn't get into the Army. So then he takes the Army physician out, gets him drunk, and has him sign the papers
Oh,
so
shit.
that so he can get into officers candidate school. And then he gets bounced out of that. So he goes back, his adopted family, I think it was his uncle, they had greenhouses. Well, he would grow flowers and stuff. And then all of a sudden, of course, the war started, and he realized that greenhouses were a great place for assembly for packaging. So he
Wow.
would
Yeah.
assemble munitions, rifles, small
Wow.
artillery pieces, etc. And he made his millions that way.
Wow.
So, but remembering he was an orphan, one day he went by a Catholic orphanage and he had them drive up, and he walks up and he knocks on the door, and the Mother Superior answers, and he says, "Sister, where the children's bicycles?" She goes, "Mr. Livingston, we don't have money for bicycles." And of course he talked to her a little bit more. The next day, the local bicycle shop shows up at the orphanage. He says, "I have an order for 150 kids' bicycles,
Wow.
compliments of Mr. Livingston."
Good
That's
for
the type
him.
of man he was. Yeah, he was a
Yeah.
good man. And he gave a lot of money and land to the Catholic Church up in Canada before he
Wow.
passed. Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
so people that do give money, I think, even though I don't know if he was ever nouveau rich, but he worked his butt off and he started from nothing. And I think he remembered where he came from. He never flouted it, in front of anybody or flaunted it, pardon me.
Right.
So, yeah,
Hey,
but,
I would be happy for a friend of mine that hit well to invite everybody on a vacation somewhere and go do something one time, and that's it. I don't need anything from anybody. And I think that the other part that I would put into all of this context is if you drive a really nice car and live in a plot of land that would be considered to be a mansion or, et cetera, not a McMansion, not one of the, just a big 4-bedroom house, but the real thing. Everybody comes to you to borrow money. Everybody. And look, then they don't mean any harm. They just go, well, that's where the money is. That's probably who to ask. Nobody means anything by it. But you're opening yourself up to that. And one other thing that I would put on all that, you only get to live in one house at a time. So my wealthiest uncle in Ireland sold potatoes. I wish I was kidding. So he would go buy a whole farm's potatoes. He had a 2.5-ton truck. He would take them up to Dublin and sell them on the side of the road. That guy died with 16 million euro, which at the time was like $25 million American dollars. Mm-hmm. And his big thing is the reason he didn't buy real estate is he goes, yeah, I can only sleep one place at a time. I just don't need it. And he was incredibly practical about the entire thing. And he sat on that fortune forever. And I think if it came around to me again, that's probably the type of person I would be. Their family had nice stuff, but it was nothing crazy. Like if you owned a pool in Ireland, everybody thought you were an asshole because it would make everybody's water run slow to fill your pool up.
Hey, I've had Irish people yell at me from across the street for me just wearing gloves. It was winter.
Show off. Right. I like to believe that it's possible that you could do that well and not end up on Cribs. And, I'm trying to remember what this documentary series was that I saw. And this kid was out of the Johnson & Johnson family. So he obviously had a huge trust, but he had a $50,000 a year job and he lived on that $50,000. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was incredibly impressive that he didn't buy into all that stuff. My oldest son, I think he still doesn't have a cell phone. He just never bought into any of it. He just doesn't give a shit. And I envy that more than I envy being on Cribs, because you look at some of those houses and you go, where do you get a list of workmen that take care of that weird pool? Because you can't just call a regular person when you got a $500,000 pool. You got to call the best of the best of the best. And they're busy already. They don't need yours.
I remember one of the things I always get a kick out of is when you get a bunch of rich people around and they start bragging. And, I'm going to do this for my kids. I'm going to do that and all this kind of stuff. And they look at me and they go, what do you want for your kids? And I looked at them and I said, happiness.
Yeah, sanity.
I said, that's all. I said, that's all they really need.
Yeah.
I said, is happiness. And yeah, I got a couple of stiff upper lips on that one. They weren't real happy. I mean, I'm like, I'm a simple guy, and so always have been. And so, it's, I told Julie, I said, I'd be happy with you living in a trailer park someplace. And she looks at it, she goes, I like this better though.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Deepak's heard this from me before. Since I don't live in my hometown, I've never felt like I needed to keep up with the Joneses. I've lived down here in Oklahoma for about 25 years almost. And God, it's been relieving. I didn't have to chase anything. I mean, just didn't have to do it. And I have to be honest also and say, if I was living in my hometown, I would not feel the same way. I would feel some innate competition. I really would. So I don't want to dog everybody, but because I know I would be different in that situation.
Well, I think one of the things that I've had a couple of friends recently strike it rich because they worked their butts off. I had one gentleman good guy, sell his broker dealership that he developed for
Nice.
23 years. And Julie says, are you happy about him? I said, I'm ecstatic. I says, I'm always happy whenever any of my friends hit it. I think
Right.
it's great, and I never, you don't, you're not jealous of them. It's just, it was their time. They took the risk that maybe you didn't want to take, and it paid off for them. And I've had plenty of friends that have ended up losing everything.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine that had securities that were worth at one point in time $35 million.
Right. Nice.
Okay. And he goes, and I followed it right down. He says, I finally sold out at 2 million.
Yep.
I said, that's
Yep.
great. He goes, then I married the wrong woman, and I now work for $25 an hour.
Wow.
Sean, I was going to tell you, we're like 4 minutes left, and Dan was giving us a very inspiring, nice story till it all went down the shitter.
That is the way we end our podcast every week. Every week. Hey, anything on a close on this, literally from a guy I've been in business 40 years. You're going to have good years. You're going to have shitty years. You're going to have healthy years. You're going to have sick years. Man, stock some money away, because if I would have saved just 10% of what I made in my early 20s, Lordy, I'd be living sweet. 10%. Shit. Take us out, Deepak.
Thank you so much, Dan Powers, for joining us from Denver, Colorado. Sean Cummings, Oklahoma City, as usual, bothering me. This was the Villagers Podcast. Please like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment. We'll try and answer them. Don't send us mean letters today, because we said a lot of shitty things about a lot of topics.
Thank you, guys. Dan, good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you all. Y'all take care.